What is up, everyone? Welcome to week 7 of the Absolutely Epic Early Week podcast. I am your host, JM to Win, speaking apparently more slowly than normal. Just realized that. Apologies. I am hanging out with a couple of my good buddies. Bobby Fi, how you doing, man?
Not too bad, man. Wasn't the best weekend for me, but hanging in there. How you doing?
Doing well, yeah. It seems like that was a theme for us, which is funny because Grant and I were talking before the show when you were having some audio issues. Neither of us had a great weekend, but we had some really tremendous calls. I've gotten a lot of tweets and texts from my NFL Edge this last week, people thanking me for making them lots of money. So I'd like to get in on that train, but it's a new week, and hey, we have all the info. We'll roll forward and bounce back. What do you think about that?
Sounds good.
All right, we're going to bring in our third member with our weekly edition of Grant's Rant. Grant, take it away.
Okay, I'm going to talk about an issue that's very near and dear to my heart for the last 2 years, and it's that the older I get, the more of my problems are butt-related now. I remember when I was working at my accounting job, sitting in a chair all day, I had to wear black pants because the sweat would show otherwise, and I hate flying on planes for multiple reasons, but the biggest one of which is if I fall asleep on the plane, I almost always wake myself up with a fart, and you just don't know what to do with the people around you to respond to that. This relates to football because Ryan Fitzpatrick's being a butt, and he's benched now, and I'm sad.
I feel like it's now necessary for Bobby and me to mute our microphones while you are on your Grant's Rant so that we don't just mess everything up with our laughter.
Yeah, I was wondering why I was so quiet.
It's like when you're telling a joke and you're getting no reaction. I was definitely laughing.
Yeah.
I can't speak for listeners, but I definitely enjoy it each week. So
I think there's going to be a large quantity of 40-year-old men that can relate to me who listen to this.
Before we get into actual football, we have some more opportunity for Grant-generated laughter, and that is we had a text today. Obviously, listeners of the pod know that we each make a bold call at the end of each pod, and whoever gets the bold call wrong has to send out an embarrassing tweet and cannot clarify the tweet, cannot respond to any questions, cannot like any retweets, nothing. We just have to pretend like it's a perfectly normal and sane tweet. Grant has lost the last 2 weeks and has had to talk about his heart being broken and has had to talk about Owl City's Fireflies song and how much he loves it. So today we talked, and Bobby and Grant and I decided that Bobby and I both lost. We decided to both take the fall. Bobby's bold call was Tavon Austin. We all took a low-priced wide receiver.
Which by the way, turned out not to be a bold call at all.
No, right? I feel like maybe everybody listened to the podcast because he was like 30% owned.
Yeah, he was 30% owned.
But yeah, as a point per dollar scoring, Brandon LaFell for Grant, Tavon Austin for Bobby, and Sammy Coates for me. So I thought about making a pivot off of Coates because when I made the call, I did not know he had a broken thumb. But he started, so I stuck with Coates. He got 4 targets. So Bobby and I have both chosen to take the fall since Coates played and got targets and since Tavon Austin was atrocious. So Grant has 4 tweets for us to choose amongst. We have not heard them yet. So Grant, would you like to share with us what our options are?
Yeah, I'm going to start off from best to the ones you'll probably hate the least. So the first one, you have the choice of these 4. My favorite part of Sunday is when they zoom in on the O-linemen's sweaty butts. Hashtag show off what your mama gave you. Second worst or second best, Toot Toot Tootie at Genie for 07 has a rockin' booty. Number 3, haven't paid much attention to this election over the last 6 months, but this guy Trump really knows what's up. Hashtag T for P. Or at Genie for 07. Just listen to all of Nickelback's albums. I could not have been more wrong. They might be better than Kanye. Hashtag Nickelback for president.
Okay, so the first thing we got to decide is, Bobby, are we each going to choose one, or is one of us going to tweet it and the other is going to retweet with an affirming response? I'm fine each tweeting our own.
Wait, what do we have to read? I'm confused now. I thought it was just us tweeting our own.
Well, we can each tweet one of those or like you could tweet one and I could retweet it and in agreement with a comment of my own, agreeing with you as thoroughly as possible.
Okay, that sounds good.
But I'm down to actually tweet one myself, so you can decide
Okay.
if you want to retweet mine or.
Okay.
So
Can I
Grant,
wait
what
to
were
see
the
which
first
one
two
you are?
again?
Which one?
My favorite my favorite part of Sunday is when they zoom in on O lineman's sweaty butt. Hashtag show off what your mama gave you, or toot toot tootie at Genie for 07 has a rockin' booty.
I'm gonna go with God. I'm like ruining my career, but I will go with the toot toot tootie one.
Oh gosh,
And I will
I'm
tweet
so
that
happy
out.
right now.
I will tweet that out on Tuesday during prime Twitter hours while people are distracted at work. I guess around 10 a.m. West Coast,
Yeah.
and that way as many people as possible see it. So, Bobby, you want to retweet mine with an agreement, or you want to tweet your? I think you should have to tweet your own.
I'm
Honestly,
tweeting my own. Yeah, I'm tweeting my own, and because I feel like people know me well enough to know that if I'm taking the safest one because people won't ever believe it coming from me. So I'm going with the Trump for president. Whatever I have to say.
Okay, not the Nickelback one.
No, because that like might scare like some people. I know.
All right, so we'll have those up tomorrow. Listeners, look for that, and obviously, feel free to retweet and, as Grant would say, razz us as much as you'd like.
Oh, Raz, you guys real good.
And then stick around to the end of the show if you can survive with us for this week's Bold Calls. We actually have some really cool stuff to get to this week. As always, we're going to look at trend or trap, and we're going to look at five things from this last weekend or from this point in the season that we're going to see whether we think these are trends moving forward or traps moving forward. So a quick note for listeners. I do feel that in a lot of our calls that we've made have been pretty spot on and have maybe had a harder time trusting ourselves than some listeners have trusting us. So feel free to take our thoughts and make some money off of them. And hopefully Bobby and Grant and I will start doing the same this weekend. So the first trend or trap we're going to look at, we're going to run through these first couple pretty quickly. We might need to spend a little more time on the last three. But the first one, and Grant, I'm going to throw it to you first on this, is Jay Ajayi's usage. He got, over 20 carries this last week, over 200 yards, while Arian Foster hardly saw the field at all. So do you think that Arian Foster is just not healthy yet, or do you think Jay Ajayi is the lead back? Does it even matter? What's your take on this?
So they weren't giving him the ball most of the time when Foster was out at the beginning. We look at what they did last year with Lamar Miller, and they weren't giving him the usage. And Arian Foster, I think he's just not healthy right now. So there's no reason to think that Jay Ajayi is going to get that much usage going on in the future. Maybe this week he might get a little bit more, but after that, it's going to be just complete crapshoot in that offense. And I expect Foster to actually get almost all the usage back within 2 weeks.
Any interest in Ajayi or any early week interest in Ajayi against Buffalo this week?
Maybe 3% of my lineups, but no, not really. I mean, there's not a lot of value at running back, but I don't like him.
All right, Bobby, what's your take on the Ajayi situation?
It's Coors, man. It's playing Pittsburgh. It shouldn't count as a normal game. Things happen, both for and against them. It's weird. They play weird games, and I think it was a fluky situation. I don't really understand why Pittsburgh was sagging back so much. I was watching that game, and he had such huge holes to run through. But I don't think it's a trend going forward. I have no interest in him. I think Foster. I don't know if he'll get the bulk of the usage back, but I think he'll take enough of the carries away. And I don't think that it really matters because I just feel like there's going to be better spots, and this was sort of a fluky week.
Yeah, that's a good point about better spots. As far as there's not going to be many weeks the Dolphins have a huge lead. My take on it is, I'm going to be keeping a close eye on it, obviously, because if it is for real, we can still jump on. But I'd rather jump on in week 8 and miss another good week from Ajayi. My take is they worked really, really hard to not have Ajayi as their lead back. Last year's coaching staff hated him. This year's coaching staff, Adam Gase came in and immediately, they kept saying things about, Ajayi, we think he can be our number one runner. And then all offseason, they were trying to get different running backs. And so it's like they really don't like this guy. I don't think that we're going to see him getting, 20-plus touches weekly moving forward. Next one we're going to talk about, and Bobby, I'll throw this to you first, and that is Drew Brees' road struggles. Is it a trend or a trap? Is this something that we can bank on for the most part, which is especially worth noting because they're going to Kansas City, who typically plays really good defense at home. Is it a spot you're interested in for Brees, or are you fine to stay away given his road struggles and the matchup?
Honestly, I think that there's going to be certain spots where you could take Brees on the road in certain games, but it'll be weird situations, maybe like at Atlanta or something. But I don't think this is a week I would even consider it. I watched the Chiefs-Raiders game, and I was really impressed actually with the Chiefs' defense. It looks like a totally different defense than they were earlier in the year, and I don't know. I just thought maybe that they look different. They just looked more sprung. And I feel like I'm not going to really look at taking anybody against them until I sort of see how this plays out.
And that's something we saw last year too with the Chiefs. They started really slow, and then people kind of started picking on them, and they turned it around pretty quickly. So that's obviously we deal with such small sample sizes in football that people get really excited about one thing. But yeah, I mean, I think that's a great point as well. Grant, what's your take on using Brees on the road in general and specifically this week against Kansas City?
I mean, we saw what Kansas City did against the best QB in the league, Ryan Fitzpatrick, a month ago. And so that makes me immediately want to be off him. But yeah, you look at his home road splits, and it's way, way too damning to even think about going towards him anytime soon on the road. And I mean, it's something you got to realize too, like you look, why is that? And New Orleans has got a great home crowd. And on top of that, it's in a dome, so it kind of takes out all the weather elements. You could look into it and playing someone against Detroit, or if he's playing against Detroit, because they also play in a dome. Like, look at similar situations, and maybe you can do it. But in something like this, where it's going to be a loud stadium and it's one of the toughest places to play in the NFL, there's no reason to go there.
Yeah, I think it's interesting too about the home road splits because it's kind of counterintuitive, but sometimes with a large enough sample size, we just have to say, okay, it makes sense. I mean, look at Roethlisberger. Obviously, he played on a torn meniscus in the second half last week, but even before that, he was atrocious, and he's not usually that bad on the road. But he's only had three touchdown games over the last 3 seasons on the road, compared to basically every week at home that he throws 3 touchdowns. That's Roethlisberger. And same thing with Brees. It's pretty glaring over time. And like you guys both said, Kansas City is an extremely tough place to play. I'm fine leaving Brees alone. I'm fine leaving their pass catchers alone. Brandon Cooks is always way better at the Superdome. On that note, T.Y. Hilton is always way better at Lucas Oil Stadium, and that's something that people kind of overlook as well, to where they really jump on board regardless. And then he has these huge games at home on the turf and is less likely to go off on the road. So definitely worth paying attention to, even if we don't quite know why it happens. We've seen it enough that it's worth paying attention to. In that same game, take a little more time to unravel. If not, maybe we'll save some time for jokes at the end. But the Chiefs' backfield usage. The reason why I thought this was particularly interesting is it's easy to overlook the Chiefs' offensive on playing keep away. We talk about it a lot with the Cowboys, but talk about it less with the Chiefs. We saw it last week. I mean, they had no interest in passing against a bad Raiders pass defense unless they had to. I mean, they just wanted to run the ball because they could. There's also no reason to believe the Saints can stop the Chiefs on the ground. So, Bobby, I'm going to throw it to you again on this one. Chiefs backfield usage, it was skewed heavily towards Spencer Ware last week. Is Ware usable this week against the Saints? Do you think that the split's going to be too even between him and Jamal Charles for us to use either back? What's your take on that situation?
As of this moment, I would lean towards taking Charles over him. But I don't know that I would really take either. I really want to see how it plays out. It's hard this early in the week to know what's going to happen by Sunday. But I want to see what I hear and just sort of what's happening around. Like, this one thing I do is like, I'll just scour over the Twitter for the Chiefs or whatever, because I actually am interested in that. It's a great spot in that game. If you somehow hear Jamal Charles is all of a sudden going to get the bulk of the carries on Thursday, it might mean something. I don't know. But for right now, I'm probably staying away from both of them. But I would probably go with Charles over Ware.
Is there any thought in your mind that maybe the Chiefs could get off 30-plus carries against the Saints and make both guys potentially usable to where you wouldn't mind taking the plunge even without getting extra information throughout the week?
I think it'd be hard with the limited upside if they were completely guaranteed going to split, unless one of them breaks off for a big run or something and gets a second touchdown that way. That's why I'm not that interested in either right now, because if they are going to split that much. But like I said, if they're going to split, I'm just not interested. If they aren't, then I would definitely have some interest, especially in Charles.
Situation.
Did you say my name? You cut out for a half second. I'm assuming yes.
Yeah.
So, so it's one of those things where I'm just too worried about Charles's workload right now. If it were a 50-50 split, I think that you could do it. You can treat it kind of like you treat the Atlanta backfield right now. Both still have huge upside, getting the full concentration of reps. But Jamal Charles, he's just such a good running back that if he is healthy, I don't really see them throwing it too much over to Ware. And so I think that he really is not healthy, and Reed seemed to say that already a lot. But you forget that he has one of the highest averages per rush in the entire NFL, in NFL history. He's averaging like 5.4 yards a carry throughout his entire career. And
I think he might still be number one all time.
Is he? That wouldn't surprise me at all.
I could be off on that, but he was up until like last year.
I think he is.
Yeah. I think Jim Brown's number one, isn't he? Maybe not. I could be wrong.
We'll get the stats department on that. But no, I think it, like, Grant, you bring up a good point for, as far as if Charles were going to get 15 carries or something, for years, he's been underused almost his whole career. I mean, he rarely gets 20 carries, and he's still one of the most usable backs, and is often priced over $7K. So I think if you expect 15 to 16 carries, even if that's just half the workload, game with that sort of usage. The thing that's tough for me is Andy Reid tends to lie. Trustworthy in what he says. Like this last week, I liked Spencer Ware a lot. Jamal Charles had tweeted something to the effect of the training wheels were coming off or whatever. And then Andy Reid came out and was like, yeah, well, we're going to sprinkle him in. And I kind of got the sense that maybe Reid was just lying, to catch the Raiders off guard. And Jamal Charles was going to get 18 carries. And I really liked Spencer Ware, but I couldn't use him because of the chance that Andy Reid was lying. So I have a hard time this week. Like I'm leaning more toward Ware because I feel like I do think they can get 30 carries in this game, and I think Ware could get 20 of those with Charles getting 10. But if they feel Charles is healthy, he certainly looks healthy, then, I could be stuck with 5 points from Ware while Jamal Charles puts up 25. So it's a tough situation because the matchup is so pristine, but obviously I think we're all kind of saying we'd like a little more information. Bobby, if Andy Reid comes out and says that Jamal Charles is the starter this week, doesn't say anything about workload, but just uses the word starter, would you feel comfortable going there, or would you still be a little concerned about jumping on board?
I would probably put it in a good portion of my GPPs. I think it would be a good solid play. He does have massive upside if he somehow gets 20 carries. He has as high upside as anybody in football. So yeah, you probably have to look at using him.
in any matchup, and then especially in this matchup, like you said, he could put up the top score of the week. But then that's a tough call. Grant, if Andy Reid says that Charles is the starter, does that swing you toward him, or will you still be concerned?
I mean, the only problem I would have with that is that more people are going to be on him. I think that's absolutely. I mean, aren't the Saints the worst against the rush in the entire league right now?
They were 32nd last year. They're not quite at the very bottom this year, but yeah, I mean they're awful.
Come on, Greg, stop asking questions. Bring in some stats. Get it loaded up on the computer.
As of last week, they're 32nd. I haven't loaded up the numbers this week against running back. But also, like, okay, if you want some stats, Chiefs are a 6.5-point favorite. It has one of the highest over-unders of the week, and we both know that Alex Smith really can't do too much on offense. He can't put up that many points, so they're going to be running the ball a lot. And if he says he's the starter, that means he's going to get the majority, I believe, and they're probably going to be rushing the ball a lot with him. So, yes, play him. Huge upside at a very discounted price.
Yeah, I think that's one thing. And what is the over-under on that game, by the way?
Last time I checked, 50.
Nice.
God, I could guarantee you that game goes under. Right? I mean,
I'll take that.
Like the Chiefs.
I'll take that bet.
The Chiefs aren't. Maybe that's my bold call. Like, or maybe that's a side bet between you and me, Grant. We'll figure out something on that. But like, the Chiefs aren't going to throw the ball. They're going to run it. I mean, we saw what they did against the Raiders. The Saints are just as bad of a run defense. They're just going to run the ball and play keep away. I mean, I just can't see that game hitting 50 points. But anyhow, yeah, I mean, it'll be interesting. The Chiefs are definitely, like, the Chiefs' backfield as a whole has one of the best matchups on the weekend. Is one of the best spots, but it's a tough one to look to without some clarification. So one is going to be the Cleveland Browns pass defense. Now, I know nobody's confused and thinking they're great, but the issue I keep running into in picking on the Browns is, what are the chances the game stays close? What are the chances that the opponent keeps passing? So a few numbers. Only one quarterback on the season has been below 275 passing yards against the Browns. That was Kirk Cousins, who threw for 3 touchdowns. And for 4 consecutive weeks, the Browns have allowed a quarterback to hit 3 touchdowns against them. The Browns have also kept DeMarco Murray, LeGarrette Blount, Ryan Matthews, a few other guys, all under 4 yards per carry. So their run defense isn't atrocious. So, I mean, we know that the Browns don't have a good pass defense. We know that teams can pass on them. So the question becomes, with this week's game being in Cincinnati, should have a tough time moving the ball. Terrell Pryor is dealing with a hamstring injury. Obviously, that could change the complexion of the game if he's out. Grant, is Andy Dalton usable touchdowns in 4 straight weeks? Is A.J. Green worth paying up for? Or do we get concerned that the Bengals will just win this game by so much that they stop passing early and these guys are not as usable as the matchup? Grant, that was you.
Oh, sorry. I cut out for a second.
It's cutting out, JM, by the way. Grant, are you hearing that cut out too?
No.
Yep. Oh, so it's not me. Boom. Not me.
Yeah,
anyway.
Here's a JM rant. Last year I bought a new MacBook, which is like the thinner, faster version of the MacBook Air. It doesn't have a USB port. So I have to run my microphone through like a USB-C adapter, which I feel like is what creates this. 'Cause I have this super legit microphone from RotoGrinders, but sometimes run into this cutting out issue. So I blame the stupid post Steve Jobs MacBook with no USB connector. So that's my rant.
It doesn't have quite the same je ne sais quoi as mine, but to each their own. But yeah, so the line's at 9.5 right now, and one thing I'm really interested to see is if McCown has a chance of playing this weekend. I think he still hasn't been cleared for practice yet, and the Doesn't look like he's going to play. But if he does, I think McCown's a lot better quarterback than most people give him credit for, and he could put up big numbers. And he would be absolutely in play for me if he was, and so would Pryor, and so would.
On that note, they said that Kessler's the starter, like as in permanently.
Really? Oh gosh, I do not like them now. Bad Browns, bad. But no, so I don't think it's going to be that big of a blowout. I think it'll be a lot closer than people think. And Dalton, he can put up big numbers even when he's doing terrible. I mean, you've seen the last 2 weeks. He hasn't. At least 2 weeks ago, he didn't play that well against the Patriots. He still put up 22 points. So last week, I can't remember who he was playing, but he still did pretty well and didn't seem like he was actually playing that well. He can put up big numbers. Green can go off against literally anyone at any given time. But one guy that I'm going to be on, again, mainly because I picked him last week, but is LaFell. He's still incredibly cheap. He still saw, I think, 6 targets this weekend, and he still got a touchdown. He has a lot of red zone targets this year. I can't quite remember exactly what it is. I think he's at 6. Let me double check. No, sorry, 9 red zone targets this year. And I could see him doing huge things in the red zone. But I don't think it's going to be that big of a blowout. And I think everyone's in play from both sides of it. And not many people are going to be on because of that huge line. So I'm not saying any of these guys are really viable in cash unless Pryor is completely healthy. But I think that everyone's virtually in play. I'm not going to go as far to say Kessler, but everyone else is in play.
So just to jump in real quickly, as per which Grant is like the targets master in statistics, but so to piggyback off of that, the Grant just pulled out with Brandon LaFell with 9, he has more red zone targets than AJ Green, more than T.Y. Hilton, more than Allen Robinson,
more than Julio Jones, more than Antonio Brown, more than Amari Cooper, more than Mike Evans, more than T.Y. Hilton,
Benjamin, more than Larry Fitzgerald. So yeah, that is really interesting, and in tournaments, getting that touchdown is huge, especially at a cheap price. So as long as he's being trusted in the red zone like that, that continues to be something viable to look at. So Bobby, what's your take on Andy Dalton, AJ Green, this game in general?
It's not my favorite spot. I do like. I guess I'm gonna have some of it. I actually think Cincinnati's gonna win this game pretty easily. I think it's kind of like actually like Jeremy Hill is sort of as a value play in this. And I think that LaFell is a solid play. I don't know that I'm gonna jump and pay up for Green in this matchup. I just feel like it's a game that I feel like they're gonna be able to control however they want, and they're not gonna need to have an explosion. However, he could break off a couple big plays, so I'll probably use him a little bit, but I don't know. I'm not going to really touch the Cleveland side of the ball all that much. I actually think Cincinnati's better than they've been playing. And if you look at who they've played, that shows you a lot. I mean, they just lost at Dallas and at New England. I don't think that it's necessarily you're seeing that this defense is as bad as it seems.
Oh, yeah. I mean, they've had an extremely difficult schedule. And but I do think that, it's worth noting that the Browns this year, I think they have only one game under 20 points.
That
was against the Patriots. Like, the Browns offense has put up points.
But against the Titans in a comeback weird situation, like they're not – I don't know if I would call that like I'd be up for that. I feel like it's been sort of fluky, and I feel like – I don't know.
I'm not on the Browns side. Although if Terrell Pryor's out, Ricardo Lewis has seen target totals of, I think, 4, 5, 5, and 9 over the last 4 weeks, with the 9 coming this last week. So he would obviously step into a big role if Terrell Pryor were out. But yeah, outside of him, I'm not particularly interested in the Browns. But I just think, I wonder if the Browns can keep the game close enough that Dalton remains usable this week. So I guess my take is, I wasn't on and Jarvis Landry against the Browns. Of course, if Cody Parkey didn't miss that field goal, that game doesn't go into overtime. Tannehill doesn't hit the 300-yard bonus. Jarvis Landry doesn't hit the 100-yard bonus. A lot changes that week. But yeah, I was on Kirk Cousins against the Browns. But I've had a harder time doing it just because I'm it's going to be a blowout. And Bobby, like you said, the Bengals could conceivably control this game however they want. So I do have a little bit of a harder time. I'm going to give Dalton a serious look this week. I'll definitely give AJ Green a serious look. I love the Brandon LaFell take just because if they're going to have an easy time moving the ball, if they're going to get 2 touchdown passes, one of them could easily go to LaFell. And then one last note, Bobby, you brought up Jeremy Hill. So one thing I always encourage people to pay attention to what influences ownership. So one thing that influences ownership is RotoWorld's blurbs. And RotoWorld this week, blurbed, and they'll probably blurb again later this week, something to the effect of, it appears Giovanni Bernard has taken over in the backfield. Going on for 3 years now. That, they're rarely do Gio and Hill split carries down the middle. One guy gets the bulk of the usage. 2 weeks ago, RotoWorld was saying that it looks like Jeremy Hill's backfield now. It's going to go back and forth all season. So knowing that you're going to see blurbs that are saying things like Gio's the lead back now means we will see lower ownership on Jeremy Hill, or we should.
But Gio's the lead back was only because of one game at Dallas where they were down 28-0 at halftime, and that's why. So game flow situation, it's all been situational. This is the kind of situation where they're going to use Hill for 20 carries like they did against Miami in week 2.
No, I mean I absolutely agree with you. I'm saying though, this last week Gio was getting carries inside the 5-yard line. Gio was out there.
Yeah, I was surprised by that too a little bit.
And but I don't think we have a 3-year sample size of this now, where 2.5-year sample size, where it changes from week to week on this team. And so since we can't really predict who's going to get the usage, the smart thing is to go with the lower owned guy. And I do think that will be Jeremy Hill this week. And Jeremy Hill obviously has as good a chance as Gio, probably a better chance in this matchup of being the lead back. So just something to think about heading into this week. Any final takes on that game?
If you're going to take Hill, then obviously stay away from everyone else on the Bengals offense, because Hill's going to get a lot of his points from just vulturing touchdowns. I mean, he may get a decent amount of yards otherwise, but he can go and have those 2-3 touchdown games. And yeah, like Bobby said, it's one of those things where it all depends on the flow of the game. I mean, Gio is a lot better catching balls out of the backfield. So in a game where it's going to be a blowout, I think that he's going to be less than effective doing that, because they're not going to be throwing the ball that much. So I think it's one of those things where, I think Hill's the better option, especially if his ownership's that low. And because of what Gio's done the last 2 weeks, one of which was against New England where they had to throw the ball a bunch. So, those are my thoughts.
All right. The last trend or trap we're going to look at is the Lions defense. And I think we can all agree that it's a trend that the Lions defense is legitimately really bad. The question is, this week they're playing Washington. We don't know about Jordan Reed. Concussions are obviously difficult to diagnose, especially from this far away from Sunday and this far away from the team. But given Reed's history of concussions, there's a good chance he doesn't play this week. So if I guess, Grant, go ahead and take me through your thoughts on who on the Redskins you would be most likely to target, assuming Reed is out, and then I guess, throw in your thoughts if Reed does happen to play as well.
All 3 wide receivers, Crowder, Garcon, Jackson. Crowder's probably the worst because I think he might be the highest price out of the 3, depending on the site. But Garcon's 3,700 on. He's a lot higher price than Garcon is.
No, Deshaun is the most.
Well, in any case, Garcon had 12 targets this week, which is just silly. Yeah, Jackson is up there, but he had 11 targets. Both those guys, Cousins is a big yardage guy. He'll get a lot of yards. He'll throw a lot of passes. And without Reed in the game, which is his most trusted target, he's just going to throw all over the place, including to probably Matt Jones out of the backfield, which I do not like that guy. But they're not good against wide receivers. And you see it week in and week out that they're always going to give up one huge game to one wide receiver at least, if not 2 different players. So it's one of those things where Garcon, because he's only 3,700. He had 12 targets this weekend, and him, like LaFell, has more red zone targets than 10 out of the top 15 priced wide receivers this week.
Yeah, 8. I mean, Garcon has 8, and Jamison Crowder has 9 red zone targets. I mean, both of these guys are used close to the goal line.
Well, the problem with Crowder right now is he started off with just huge amount of targets in the first few weeks, and he's kind of stumbled off in the last 2 or 3 weeks, and I think he only had 4 this last weekend. So that's why, with him being $600 more than Garcon is, and with Garcon being a bit of a deep threat, you kind of would rather play him, but it all depends on ownership too. So we have to look at that later on in the week. But Garcon's a great play regardless, unless he's going to be 20% owned. I think that you can take plenty of shots on him against this Lions D.
Bobby, what's your take on this game, on the Redskins, assuming Jordan Reed's out?
I like everyone. I really like Deshaun Jackson the most. They were looking for him in a lot of big spots. He had a lot of near misses. Last week he had 9 targets, he only had 4 catches, I think. But he, I feel like he's still the big play threat. They look to him. They're going to look to him with Reed out. I feel like every receiver is a real threat. Actually, the 2 and 3 receivers have beat the Lions up worse than the number ones have. So for the most part, not necessarily week in and week out, but overall. Anyway, I think that I like everybody. I sort of agree with Grant. I think you could take shots with everybody in GPPs. I don't know which I would say is safest, but because they all actually seem pretty reasonable to me. I like Crowder a lot too. I mean, I guess it's price and site dependent.
Yeah, I've already been eyeing Garcon this week just because that price stood out. Obviously, I have a hard time seeing him hit that 20-point mark that we optimally want from everybody on our team, but the price per targets with the matchup is pretty great. He's still a great athlete. His role is different here than it used to be with the Colts, but he's a great athlete. He can do stuff with the ball in his hands. Deshaun Jackson, obviously you're looking boom or bust, but his upside is enormous. And I'm actually there's not a lot of value this week, right? Especially at running back, but I like Matt Jones. He has, 16 carries last week, 14 the week before, 22 the week before, 17 the week before. And the 14 was against Baltimore, which is a tremendously difficult running matchup. He had 16 last week in a really tough matchup with Philadelphia, put up over 100 yards and a touchdown. So Matt Jones, you're obviously taking very little target upside for DraftKings, where it's PPR scoring. His target high on the season is 2. This is the sort of game where Matt Jones could turn his 18 carries into over 100 yards and a touchdown at 4,200 on DraftKings. So, Bobby, any thoughts on Matt Jones before we move on?
No, I actually agree. I think that I really don't like him, but it's definitely for 4,200, I don't really see how he's not like a really obvious play. I think he's going to be really popular this week.
Yeah, this isn't like Ryan Matthews last week where the matchup was phenomenal, but we're trying to project if he's actually the lead back or not. Like, we know Matt Jones is the lead back as long as they're not passing the ball. So, unless they get way behind, which could happen, but unless they get way behind, he's going to get his carries. Grant, any take on Matt Jones?
I hate the guy, but I don't mind the play this week.
Yeah, I think that's kind of how we all feel on this, is like we don't actually like him as an NFL player, but the spot is pretty sweet for sure. Quick note on that too, looking at the prices. I guess we're going to get to Money Matters in a moment where we talk about some values, but we haven't. Doug Martin didn't practice today. It's still just Monday, but if he doesn't come back, Jacquizz Rodgers is 4,300 playing San Francisco this week. Would be an interesting play as well. So it leads us into Love at First Sight. And Grant, I'm going to throw it over to you for a Love at First Sight story and a Love at First Sight game that just might tie into that Jacquizz Rodgers mention.
So, like with all my stories, I went out to a bar a few weeks ago and saw this nice table full of older women. And I don't know why, but one time when I passed, they asked me for a lap dance. So, of course, I obliged because I'm a very kind person, and I believe I was a stripper in one of my other lives. But I gave her a lap dance, start talking to him, talk to this one. When we have a real nice conversation, she tells me about how her kid's my age and blah, blah, blah. So then we start smooching at the table. I asked for her phone number, and apparently this is just the case that happens to me all the time. She did not give it to me. She gave me her Snapchat account, which immediately my thoughts are, all right, she wants me to send her naked pictures or vice versa. All right, let's see how this goes. In any case, never talk to her again. Go outside, find a pair of heels in the tree. And now my love at first sight is the woman who went up climbing a tree in heels because I would like to find that lady. They're still sitting in my living room. I don't know why I brought them home, but if you lost your heels in Highland Park, California on the weekend of September 23rd, call me.
Snapchat you.
Yeah, follow me on Snapchat if you can find me. I'm pretty sure I'm the only Grant Niefer on earth. But in any case, this leads me to someone who I've never actually seen play well, which is Jameis Winston. Because every time I seem to watch his games, he's just doing terrible. I watched the game against against Carolina, just looked awful. But this weekend, I really, really love the spot. The spread is -2 or under, and he's going against Chip Kelly. I mean, a lot of people are going to see what he did last game, which he looked terrible. Jaquiz was stealing all the touches the entire game, so he barely got to throw the ball until even the second half. And when they were trying to get the lead, they were still not throwing the ball. It makes me think they just had a bye week, so he's going to be coming off extra rest. He's going to be coming off a lot extra planning, and it's going to be a great spot against him, against a San Francisco defense that is giving up a crazy amount of yards rushing to the quarterback, which Winston doesn't get that many, but he can always vulture a touchdown or two in the end zone, which rushing touchdowns are obviously worth more. Mike Evans gets just an absurd amount of targets every week. The Carolina game, he had a crazy amount that he just completely missed because Winston couldn't throw a straight ball. But Winston's got all the talent in the world, so I love him. I love Brait, who he kind of disappointed a lot of people, so you'll have people off of him 2 weeks ago. And then San Francisco side of the ball, Hyde is one of my favorite running backs in the league because he continually is underdrafted. And if he wouldn't have gotten injured this week, he would have done well. And Kaepernick's still really cheap. Don't sleep on Patton from San Francisco. It's one of those things where you change quarterbacks and you don't know who his favorite target is. And it seems to be Patton, judging from this game last week with the amount of targets he got. So he could do well at a very low price, or even Torrey Smith or Curley have upside based on what Smith did this week and what Curley did as Blaine Gabbert's favorite target. So I think almost anyone in that entire game is in play. And like you said earlier, Jaquiz Rogers, if Martin doesn't stop, they apparently are not too afraid to feed him the ball.
I love the Quentin Patton call. I used him on the Monday to Thursday slate in week 1 and haven't touched him since. But yeah, I mean, I didn't even see that 7 targets this last week. And, people will flood to Torrey Smith because he had the big touchdown, but 7 targets, 4 catches, 52 yards. I like that a lot. Bobby, any quick thoughts on that Tampa Bay San Francisco game? And then go ahead and give us your.
Yeah. Sorry, I cut out.
Quick thoughts on Grant's game and then your game.
I actually I like Grant's game a lot too. I think that both sides are playable. Anytime it's a Chip Kelly offense, it's I'm going to want a piece of the other side of it usually, especially when your team is still as bad as San Francisco is. But yeah, I like that game a lot. My love at first sight is San Diego at Atlanta. Shocker. I tend to go for and against San Diego every week. I like everybody pretty much in that game. I probably use as much of Coleman. I'll probably use a little more of Freeman. I also I love Julio. He's probably my number 1 player this week. I like the entire San Diego side. I still feel like they're too cheap. I feel like it's more of a Benjamin game than a Williams game, but Williams at 4,400 is still an amazing play, actually. I don't know. I love every part of the game, and I love the cheap side of it for San Diego. And I think Hunter Henry is starting to become a little bit of a thing.
Oh, I definitely agree with Hunter Henry. And yeah, I mean, I think that like Matt Ryan's in play. Like you said, Julio Jones is probably the top raw points projection on the weekend.
Rivers is a good play.
Rivers is a good play. Like the early teams I've built have had Devontae Freeman in them. There's definitely a lot to like in that game. And it's not going to go overlooked by any means, but there's something to be said about two teams that are just putting up a ton of points, and each team is allowing plenty of points as well. So I think that's a phenomenal spot. And on Grant's game, yeah, I mean, like San Francisco's been better on defense at home traditionally, but I think Jimmy Ward is still out, who's their best cornerback. Navarro Bowman's out for the season. Like, who cares if they've been better on defense at home the last couple of years when they don't have any talent out there at the moment? So I like that game a lot. And, the targets that Mike Evans is getting is just absurd. He's got to be one of the top plays as well this weekend. My game, also no surprise, because it's the third week in a row I've gone there, is the Angry Brady game.
This week's edition, I was so angry that you got this game.
This week's edition is Angry Brady at Pittsburgh. There is obviously a chance that Brady and the Patriots offense as a whole goes a little bit lower owned because of game flow concerns now that Ben Roethlisberger will be out. Maybe that won't be the case. Maybe people, will jump on the Angry Brady narrative. But this is a funnel defense in Pittsburgh. Good run defense, poor pass defense. I don't really have any interest on the Pittsburgh side of things, mostly because these guys are priced as if Roethlisberger is playing. I still think Bell will have a usable game. I'm not as certain about Antonio Brown. Landry Jones really hurts his value because they just aren't in sync in those tight spaces. And like usually Roethlisberger will throw the ball before his break, and Brown turns around and the ball's right there. And he makes these, quick catches that nobody else can make. Landry Jones is not going to do that. So I'm less high on Brown. I think Bell has a good, raw points game, but given his price, I'm fine staying away. But basically the Patriots offense, James White, Rob Gronkowski, Martellus Bennett, this could be a good bounce back spot for Julian Edelman, Tom Brady on this game. So thoughts on Bobby's game or my game before we move on to Money Matters?
Bobby's game, love everyone. I love Sanu more than I love Julio Jones because of his price, and everyone's going to be on Julio. He had a bunch of targets this last week. He's getting a bunch of red zone targets, and he's not as injured as he was during a lot of the season. They have to throw the ball somewhere besides Julio occasionally. Plus, Julio's going to be shadowed by a better cornerback. So I don't like him as much as everyone else does, but I like him a lot. I like Coleman better than Freeman. He's going to be a lot less owned. He's a good bit cheaper in a week where you don't really have too much value at running back. And he can catch the ball out of backfield for big games, which San Diego, I think, is number one in the league for allowing targets to the running back, which is definitely his forte. I mean, you look at what he did against Denver, which also allows a bunch of targets to the running back, and he just destroyed them. He had some health issues. From the San Diego side of the ball, I love all of them. Every single Hunter, play Tyrell Williams, play Benjamin, play Rivers. Just don't play Gordon. He's not that great running back this year. As his number, he's knocking, besides a 58-yard run, I think he's averaging just a terrible yards per rush. And it's going to be a lot of throwing.
They're guaranteed. He's a lot. 2 touchdowns every week.
Oh, gosh. It seems to be, and I don't understand it. But just don't play him. Other people are going to play him. Don't play him. But yeah, everyone else in the offense is in play, and Rivers. It's going to be a high-scoring game, so Rivers is going to be throwing from behind and not giving it to Gordon. I hope. And then I haven't played Brady much at all this year. I still don't like playing him. Maybe because I have a huge problem with the guy. I still don't know why. Maybe it's Super Bowl 2 years ago that I'm still sad about. But you can play him. You can especially play him in cash. But who I'm really interested in is Jesse James, a rookie or a new quarterback's best friend, is a wide receiver, tight end. He's going to, I think, for his price, he's going to get a lot of points. Brown, you really can't do too much with him. I think he's still going to be by a wide margin because people just know the name. But also, keep in mind that Roethlisberger may play this weekend. Don't rule him out right now. Landry Jones is saying they think he's going to play. He had that one game last year where Landry Jones was the starter and just made active at the very end, and then I think Landry Jones got injured, and so they threw Roethlisberger into the game. Yeah,
I was
I think he's
tempted to
going to play
use.
this week.
I was tempted to use Roethlisberger in a tournament lineup that week. It's just obviously it would have been super dumb to do that, but it also would have been epic when he just came in and put up a monster game.
I did have him in a few, but I was really dumb in playing a lot of lineups.
Yeah, so he had surgery today. There's obviously they're saying there's hope he'll be ready following the team's Week 8 bye. But yeah, like you said, don't put anything past Roethlisberger. The complexion of this game obviously changes in a big way if Roethlisberger plays, and both sides come hugely into play. But Bobby, any quick thoughts on the angry Brady?
I'm into it. I love that game. I like everybody on. I don't know if I like everybody. I think it's a pick and choose kind of a situation, but I got to see how it plays out this week. And I don't know. I like the idea of James. I just am not sure about his upside. I still think that there's a shot for Antonio Brown to have a big game. I don't know. I also think it's going to be a closer game than people think it is, even with Landry Jones at quarterback. I think that I don't know. I'm trying to think from who I would pick exactly from New England, because other than Brady, there's nobody else I'm guaranteed anything with at this point. Gronk would be my number one who I'd lean to, but he's going to be so highly owned. I kind of want to stay off of him. But I do love. I mean, the game has just so many spots. I have to really think about it and dive more into it. But
yeah, and one thing with Gronk is he's priced. If you compare him to wide receivers, he's priced like a guy who's going to get 9+ targets. And Gronk rarely gets that many looks. It's usually more like 6 or 7. Obviously, he's used heavily close to the end zone, but like we saw last week, he can put up 150 yards on like 6 or 7 targets. But, I haven't rostered Gronk in a couple of years, mostly because usually his big games are 20 points, and that's not worth paying $7K for at high ownership when most tight ends are underpriced. But I do love Gronk as a play in general, and I agree with you. It's easier to go Brady naked than to try to pick somebody to pair with him, because he can spread the ball around so much. Though if you pick right in tournaments, if you pick James White last week or pick the right guy this week who gets 2 touchdowns, then it helps out a ton. So we're going to move on to Money Matters, our final segment where we're going to talk about pricing. Try to pick out some of the value guys on DraftKings who are standing out to us early in the week. So starting at quarterback, this is where I'm seeing the most value. Bobby, I know you don't love paying down at quarterback. I generally do like to pay down at quarterback when I can.
Well, I like to pay down if I feel like it's a sure guy to bet on. I took Hoyer in a ton of tournaments last week. I wouldn't say I don't like to pay down. I just don't. I like to bet on like our more sure points. Sorry.
Yeah, and so if it's not a Cam at New Orleans, I actually ended up going Stafford last week, which is a nice point per dollar payout, but made that pivot once Riddick was out. But yeah, if it's not something like that where it's just a sure thing, I'm fine paying down, getting 20 points at quarterback, which is probably where I'll end up this week, because there is a lot more value at quarterback to truly trust than at other positions. But at quarterback, we have against a funnel defense in Tampa Bay at 5,300 at home. Tyrod Taylor at Miami. Carson Palmer has a tough matchup against Seattle at home, but he torched Seattle last year. I'm still not convinced that Palmer is still a healthy and usable quarterback, but if you think he is, 5,700 at home is a tremendous price. Joe Flacco against the funnel defense of the Jets for 5,800. Jameis Winston, who Grant mentioned, at 5,900. Kirk Cousins against Detroit at 5,900. Andy Dalton at 6K. Mariota at 6K. Anybody else? I mean, I basically named like every quarterback under 6K, right? But Bobby, anybody else that's standing out to you in that price range or around there?
I think you actually did name every quarterback. No, I'm just kidding.
There's so much to love at the cheaper prices this week.
No, yeah, it makes a lot of sense, and of course, it's gonna. I mean, like a slightly more expensive is Phillip Rivers at 6,500. I just don't think it makes that much of a difference when you're talking about a 500 for if you feel like it's more sure points with that. I think Phillip Rivers has one of the highest upsides and will go completely overlooked. So I kind of am interested in him, but I don't think it really matters all that much. I feel like there's a lot of guys who are going to put up 25 plus points, and it's not usually where the GPPs are won. So I understand why paying down makes sense, but I think it's good to just take the short points. And I mean, Stafford had 10 less points than the leader this week, and he wasn't even in the millionaire. I think was Stafford Stafford was in the millionaire winners, or I don't know if he was or in that one or in the FanDuel one, but either way, you don't need to win at quarterback, but there's a lot of guys who can get you 20 to 28 points.
Yeah, and one thing too about you said Rivers will probably go overlooked, and that's another thing we talked earlier about paying attention to what influences ownership. Those middle-priced guys often go lower owned because people are either looking to save or to pay up. And with Rivers kind of being in between, people say, "Oh, well, I can get the same score for less money," or they say, "Well, if I'm going to go up to Rivers, I might as well try to go up to Brady or whatever." So yeah, I think that's a great point about Rivers this week at Atlanta, which is a phenomenal spot. And worth noting that Rivers usually plays better than most guys traveling west to east, but they did schedule that game with a later start time as well, which benefits the Chargers. Grant, anybody at quarterback worth mentioning that we overlooked?
I mean, not really. I want to just say that Seattle is playing on the road, so that does give them a significant boost. And one of the biggest things you have to worry about is Seattle shutting down the number one wide receiver with Sherman. But Arizona has 5 different wide receivers that they can use at any given time. So I think he's a pretty good play going in naked.
That was your logic for talking me off of Julio Jones this week, too.
Well, yeah, I talked myself off, and I regret everything.
No, it wasn't even that bad. It wasn't like he had the biggest game ever or anything.
Yeah. But then also, I don't know if it's playable on DK, but I think over on Aces, Case Keenum's like 5K if you play there. And I don't like paying down at quarterback on DraftKings. I'm all right with it on FanDuel and Aces. But yeah, DraftKings, I don't ever really like to pay down a quarterback that much unless there's great value, which I love me some Winston this week. I don't know if you mentioned Cousins, but I love me some Cousins.
I mentioned everybody apparently, so.
Yeah, I assumed you did. I just don't remember because there were so many names to remember.
So running back, there's a lot less to like. God, I wish that the Jaguars were good at running the football because that Oakland defense – has no prayer of stopping running backs. But TJ Yeldon, Chris Ivory, what are you really going to do there? So skipping over those guys, the guys who stand out to me, we mentioned Jeremy Hill earlier against Cleveland. That's obviously a tournament play because you're just guessing on usage. Well, against Cincinnati. Matt Jones against Detroit. And then obviously Jacquizz Rodgers if he's going to be getting the work against San Francisco. And then I guess on DraftKings, you can obviously look to James White with his pass game usage. Grant, what are you seeing at running back? Am I overlooking things? Are there good, cheap running backs this week?
I mean, there's not really any great plays anywhere, but one thing you can do if you're a crazy person like I am, the Saints are obviously 6.5-point underdog. Tavarius Cadet, whatever his name is, I can never pronounce anyone's name right. But he's 3K. He had 6 targets this week. He had a decent amount of points. He has some upside, especially if they're throwing from behind. I mean, it's worth a GPP flyer in some big tournaments at 3K. And then Duke Johnson, I keep saying it every week, and he's still putting up decent numbers. He's getting a bunch of targets every week. He's getting a bunch of receiving yards. And he's playing against Cincinnati, where they're probably going to be coming from behind big time with maybe Pryor out of the lineup, so they're really reduced with weapons. So I don't know why people just don't talk about him at all. And he's only 3,900. But other than that, anything else I say is probably going to sound entirely insane. Like maybe I'll say Kyle Juszczyk. Kyle Juszczyk. Just check.
Bobby, anybody else at running back?
I mean, only we talked about it earlier with the Ajayi, but I didn't realize he was 4,500 at the time, and it just makes me a little bit more interested because we know the upside's there. But I really liked I liked the Matt Jones play a lot. I like Jacquizz if he's going to get the carries. And you're right, I am guessing a little bit on Hill, but I think that I can still use him. Not in cash or anything. Obviously, he's a tournament play, but I don't think it's just a dart. If you look at the way these games play, and I watch a lot of Bengals games because the guys who run the bar down the street are all from Cincinnati. Anyway, basically, I really feel like there's a real trend of the way that they play, and you can tell who's going to get the carries. And I've been right on Bernard, and I've been right on Hill in the last couple of years, and I don't think it's going to be different this year. I really feel like it's a good spot for him. And but other than that, I don't really have anybody else that really stands out. I mean, we sort of went through everyone, I guess. That's it's not really a lot of
Yeah,
great
which
value.
is like the running back injuries were heavy to start the year, and then they've really tapered off, which I'm all for. We don't want human beings getting injured, but it is a strange dynamic for DFS because typically we are able to find, people will still be obsessed with paying up for this 7K running back that they have to have, and we can get the same production for 4K because some guys stepping in for 20 carries. That has happened a lot less the last few weeks. Which kind of leaves us looking, at somebody like Matt Jones and saying, okay, he won't get any targets, but he will get the 14 to 16 carries. One last note on that before we move on to wide receiver. Grant, you brought up Duke Johnson. There's something to be said for sure about trying to figure out where the usage will go in case of injuries. So like you said, if Pryor's out, that's 9+ targets per game that they have to spread out to other guys. And Duke Johnson will definitely be one of the beneficiaries there and will be one of the guys that most people won't think about. So it's kind of like last week I went Marvin Jones and I was back and forth between Jones and Golden Tate, and really should have gone Golden Tate just because with Riddick out, it was the shorter passes that were going to be, a void left. But
Yeah.
We saw what Golden Tate did. That wasn't because of a huge role change in that offense. It was Theo Riddick was out.
That's exactly right.
And
that's why I was in love with Golden Tate this week. Sorry.
Those are the things to look for. And so if Pryor's out, definitely those are the things we should all be keeping an eye out for this week, which brings us to wide receiver. And Bobby, I'm going to throw it to you right off and say, who are we looking at for value here at the wide receiver position? Guys, let's say under 5K-ish.
I'm going to say Golden Tate's a reasonable play at 4,900. I think that's an interesting play. I think that game could be interesting for tournaments. It could end up being another shootout that they should see coming. So, but they may not get the right part of it. I think Golden Tate's in another good spot. But I really like, there's a lot of really cheap receivers. I really like the Washington side of the ball in that game, like we talked about earlier. I love Crowder. I love Garcon. It's 3,700 is just criminal. Crowder's 43. Even Deshaun Jackson, in my opinion, is underpriced. He's higher than 5. He's 50. What is 57? I think Alan Hearns at 5K is going to be overlooked, and I think he's starting to become a thing a little bit if they're playing from behind, and I think they will be in this game. I think it's going to be more of a shootout kind of a game. Like you said, who's going to run the ball for him against that Oakland team, which is their weak spot. I don't know. I really think that they're going to attack him through the air, and I think Hearns, who had 11 targets last week, is in a great spot at 5K, and he's one of those guys who can have one of those 25, 35-point games. I think he had a 40-point game last year. Anyway, those are most of the. Tyrell Williams is a terrific play at 4,400. I love him pretty much every week, as long as they're going to keep him under 5K. He's a real thing.
There's not a lot of 10 target. Obviously, there's not a lot of 10 target guys under 5K, but there are a lot of 6, 7, 8 target guys under 5K, and finding a couple of those guys who have upside is big. Before I throw it over to you, one note: a lot of people will probably flood to Kendall Wright this weekend.
Yep.
That he was on the field only 22 snaps this last week, had 9 targets on those 22 snaps, and put up a monster fantasy game. But that's something to keep an eye on if he's going to remain a role player, because it would be tough to sustain that kind of output. And Pierre Garcon might be a little more interesting at the exact same price. So
I actually
Grant,
think that both of them are. I actually really like the idea of playing him too, by the way. Sorry.
And then you can pay up a running back. Yeah, do some different things with your roster. Grant, any other wide receivers that really, obviously there's a lot of value, but any guys that really stand out to you that we've overlooked?
I mentioned most of the guys earlier, LaFell, Sano, Patton that I'm on, but Jermaine Kearse. So they're going up against Arizona. Arizona's number 1 against the tight end this season. So Graham's going to be limited. Baldwin's going to be going up against Patrick Peterson. So he's going to be limited. Lockett could be going over the top in a lot of the time and go up against Matthew. So Jermaine Kearse, last year, towards the end of the season, he was number one of the guys in red zone targets for Seattle. And this year they haven't been in the red zone that often. So, or during the first part of it, and they've already played their bye, I think. So he's got 4 red zone targets this year. He got 6 targets this last weekend. He's in a good situation. He's only 3K. He has some upside, and Russell Wilson really likes him. He just hasn't passed the ball to him too much this year. And maybe a lot of that has to do with the fact that Wilson was injured and not able to run too much throughout the course of the year. Just Perryman, who had 9 targets this week for Baltimore, is only 3,500. Anquan Bolden had 9 targets, and he's only 4K. And then Eddie Royal, I don't know if Meredith, if you want to stay off of him, then as a play, you can go with Royal at a guy that is going to have significantly less ownership, if almost any. So that's basically at a wide receiver. But there's a decent amount of value to this weekend.
Okay, tight end. There's always value at tight end. Like looking at the guys who I actually think could get you 20 points, like Cameron Brate's a fine play, Charles Clay is a fine play. Guys who could actually get you 20 points, I think Hunter Henry is probably your best bet. Maybe Martellus Bennett at 4,500, but obviously you're guessing on where Brady goes with the ball. And Delaney Walker at 4,900 against Indianapolis, coming off a 2-target game, should go overlooked. Bobby, what tight ends, like obviously we know there's a lot of value, but which of these guys do you think actually have a shot at a big game?
I think Hunter Henry's becoming a real thing. I really like him. I think that one guy who actually has a shot at a big game, and it's funny because I was saying that I thought Cincinnati would control the game, but I do think that his targets will go up and he'll get a lot of usage, is Gary Barnidge. He's probably my favorite play, for value as I looked at it early on. I also think Julius Thomas. I don't believe in that. The Raiders, going back 3 years now against the tight end, are just so awful. And they're supposedly better this year, but they're not much better. At 3,900, there's just a lot of value. I don't know how much I feel totally 100% safe with anyone, but I do think Barnidge has the really nice upside and is in a really good spot, and it will go very much overlooked in my opinion.
Grant, tight ends?
Pitta, he had 10 targets this week. He has 48 on the year. Flacco loves him. They're going against the 26th ranked defense against tight ends so far this year, I believe. Chance at 30, Zach Miller. He can have a 2-touchdown game. He's not going against a very good defense against the tight end. Kelsey, it's a really high-scoring game, but he's a little bit more expensive. But he's getting a lot of red zone targets this year, and they're Green Bay's average at best against the tight end. But it's going to be a high-scoring game. It's going to Vegas, and those points have got to come from somewhere. And so Kelsey has a good chance at a 2-touchdown game. But I don't know if this guy has a chance at 20 points, but I believe he has a chance at 15. Can't say his name either, but CJ Federwiddle. Federwiddle. 7 targets this last week. It all depends on if Fuller's out. That will help him quite a bit. But he's going against Denver, who obviously just destroys wide receivers on a week-to-week basis and has always. Osweiler doesn't know what he's doing. He's going to just bail out to tight ends a bunch this weekend. Denver, they have one of the highest percentages of targets allowed. I think the second highest percentage of targets allowed to wide or to tight ends so far this year. And so he's only 2,500, and he could really just tear things apart.
All right. So I think that basically wraps it up. We're right at our sweet spot of about an hour and 10 minutes. We got our bold calls. I don't know if you guys have come up with yours throughout the course of the show. I'm going to go with a player that I dislike as an NFL player. And that is, and I mean his actual play, but I like the spot for him this week, and that is Colin Kaepernick. And I'm going to say that Kaepernick at 5,300 is a top 3 point per dollar quarterback this weekend on DraftKings.
That is bold.
Yeah, that's really bold.
I want another toot. What is toot tooty
Tootie. Grant Never's got a rockin' booty.
I mean,
All right.
I could see it if there's going to be a get well game. That's a good one.
Tough to run against Tampa Bay and easy to pass on them. So maybe my Kaepernick, Quentin Patton stack will take me to victory. Grant, what's your bold call?
I mean, I just want to keep it close to you, and I want to go bolder because of the choices I gave you this week for a tweet. So I'm going to say Case Keenum will outscore Kaepernick, so Case Keenum will be a top 3 quarterback this week.
Okay, I like it. And Bobby, what do we have from you?
Well, I wanted to change mine just because of what you guys are on the quarterback thing, so it made me think I should pick a quarterback. But I think that I will say that Phillip Rivers will be a top 2 overall quarterback.
Overall, I like it.
That's so much less bold than us, man.
I don't know.
Fortune does not
I don't
favor
think
you.
it is. I don't think that's true.
Overall, I
Top
mean,
two
it's
Case Keenum is
top
going
100.
to be a top 3 quarterback as opposed to Rivers in the highest over/under
No,
game by a large margin.
No, you're crazy. That's not this is a really bold call to say the top 2 quarterback. That's a tough thing to do.
Hey,
In comparison
I'm
to
on,
ours, though,
I'm on. You've already lost because you have Case
I think
Keenum.
Phillip Rivers in 2 weeks in the last 2 years has been the number 1 or 2 quarterback.
Okay, I have
Case
Kaepernick.
Keenum, all he has to do is outscore Kaepernick like he has every single time Kaepernick has played this season.
I have Kaepernick top 3 point per dollar, not
Oh,
overall.
point per dollar.
Point per
Oh,
dollar.
all right. So I'll go point per dollar.
No, I mean
All right,
that's
that
fine.
makes more sense.
You can go with just straight up Keenum outscoring Kaepernick, which won't happen.
I mean, yeah.
And by the way,
I'm just going to go
can you at least pick from a Sunday game next time? I don't even know who you're talking. I don't even look at those players because he's not playing.
Grant's all about the Monday night and Thursday night games.
I know he's stuck on the
Wait.
aces in fantasy draft and all
Man, I always forget. An elephant
It's
always
all good.
forgets.
I don't want him to have to move off of Case Keenum though. I like that plenty.
yeah, stick with it.
I don't even know who the Rams are playing yet, but I like that call plenty.
The New York Giants,
I'll let him
the one of the best defenses in the league, according to everyone who insulted me week 2.
Never forget. Hashtag never forget. Grant, I'm going to give you 8 seconds for final thoughts. Go.
Sticking on butt stuff. If you want to do something really funny, eat some beans, go to a public place, put in noise canceling headphones, and fart and act like no one else, or you can't hear it and everyone else can.
Bobby, final thoughts.
I'm annoyed by Grant's final thoughts. I just think that there's a lot of. I think this is going to be another huge week scoring wise. So there's a lot of good games to target, and I think that it's just really important to find the mid-range players this week. There's a lot of value between 35 and 5,000 for a receiver, and I think that's an important thing for people. People seem to overlook those guys in the 5K range, and they go for just the smaller high. And I think focusing on the middle of the road is the way to go.
All right, guys, thanks for hanging out. Listeners, thanks for hanging out. And we will see you on Twitter with our embarrassing tweets. And we will see you back here next week, same time, same place. Feel free to razz us real good on those tweets and make us do better with our bold calls next week. Until then, I'm JM Twin signing off. We'll see you around.